History doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it clicks. And on a warm summer morning in 1914, history fired a single shot that cracked the future wide open. One gunshot in Sarajevo didn't just kill a man. It wounded an empire, destabilized a continent, and set humanity on a collision course that would eventually end in World War II. This is where the scars begin. Welcome to the scars of a global storm front. Let's get into it. The world before the gunshot. Europe before Sarajevo looked calm on the surface, but underneath it was loaded like a cocked weapon. Empires were bloated. National pride was aggressive. Alliances were tight, brittle, and dangerous. Everyone was watching everyone else. No one trusted anyone. Power was everything, and fear was the currency. At the center of this pressure cooker stood a powerful imperial family, symbols of dominance in a region full of people who didn't want to be ruled anymore. Nationalism wasn't just an idea, it was a fuse. All it needed was a spark. Sarajevo was that spark. You know, Sarajevo wasn't just another city. It sat right there at the fault line of empires and identities. Different cultures, different loyalties, and deep resentment toward foreign rule. To some, the visiting imperial leader represented order. But to others, well, it meant occupation. The decision to parade through Sarajevo that day wasn't just careless. Honestly, it was provocative. The streets were narrow, security was loose, and tension was thick. This wasn't a friendly visit, not at all. It was a gamble. And, you know, history doesn't forgive bad bets. The assassination itself was chaotic, almost absurd in how close it came to failing. Earlier attempts went wrong. Plans collapsed. Confusion ruled the streets. Then, by pure chance, fate aligned. A wrong turn, a pause vehicle. A man standing just feet away with a pistol and a cause. 2 shots rang out. One killed the imperial heir, the other killed his wife. And in that instant, the old world began to die. This wasn't just murder, it was symbolism. Power had been challenged in public, in daylight, in the heart of a contested city. Empires could bleed. And they would. What followed was not inevitable, but it was terrifyingly fast. Accusations flew, ultimatums were issued, alliances activated like gears in a machine that no one could stop once it started moving. Within weeks, Europe was at war. What began as a regional crisis exploded into a global catastrophe. Millions would die, empires would collapse, borders would be redrawn in anger and haste. But here's the part many people miss. The assassination in Sarajevo didn't just ignite one war, it planted the seeds for the next one. The war triggered by Sarajevo shattered old empires but failed to create real stability. The peace that followed was punitive, bitter, and short-sighted. Entire nations were humiliated. Economies were crushed. Populations were radicalized. Resentment doesn't disappear, it ferments. Out of that resentment rose extremist ideologies, authoritarian leaders, and a hunger for revenge. The political and economic chaos left behind created the perfect conditions for another, even deadlier conflict. World War II was not an accident. It was a consequence. And its roots trace back to that street in Sarajevo. This is the uncomfortable truth of history. Massive global events often hinge on fragile moments. A decision not questioned, a route not changed, a warning ignored. The assassination reminds us that history isn't driven only by grand strategies or massive armies. Sometimes it's driven by individuals, emotions, and chance. One man with a weapon, one empire with pride, one world that refused to slow down. The Sarajevo assassination matters because it exposes how quickly order can collapse when tension, nationalism and power politics collide. It shows how leaders underestimate symbols, how governments overreact, how alliances turn crises into catastrophes. And it warns us that unresolved conflicts don't vanish. They wait. In a world still shaped by the outcomes of World War II, understanding where the chain truly began isn't optional. It's essential. Borders today, alliances today, conflicts today, many of them exist because of decisions made after that gunshot. The assassination didn't just scar Europe. It scarred global politics, warfare and diplomacy for generations. It taught the world the cost of arrogance, the danger of rigid alliances, and, the lethal power of unchecked nationalism. These aren't old lessons, they're active ones. Sarajevo reminds us that history doesn't announce turning points. It hides them in moments that seem small, until it's too late. A single act can drag the world into decades of blood, fear, and rebuilding. If you want to understand World War II, you don't start with tanks or speeches. You start with a gunshot echoing through a city that the world wasn't paying enough attention to. And if this story hit hard, that's the point. If you want more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world, subscribe to The Scars of a Global Stormfronts. Share this with someone who thinks history is boring. And remember, the past isn't dead. It's just waiting to be ignored again.